In this video I'll be discussing how you can use submachine guns and assault rifles with the CAST system. Now keep in mind, this is not going to be a complete tutorial where I teach you all of the things that you need to know about your weapon in question. Now with that being said, this video is for people that already know how their weapon works, whatever kind it is you have, whether you have a Heckler & Koch MP5, an AK-47 or any of the other kind of guns in the AK family, an AR-15, an M16, whatever the kind of gun it is. They do work differently to each other, and you need to know how it works. So I'm presuming that you already know where the safety is and how the bolt works, all that kind of shit. This video is going to be more specific as to how you can use it uniquely with the CAST system. With that being said, I will discuss a few reloads, because with all the reloads and shit that exists out there for all the kinds of weapons, there are some that work better with the CAST system. So with that being said, let's begin. We'll discuss positions, and for this demonstration I'll be using this $20 gun that I bought. It was battery operated and made some pew pew noise every time you pulled the trigger. I ripped all of the wires and removed the batteries. The reason why I do want to use this one, and as you could probably tell, it's modeled after a MP5, or it's like some variant of that, but it's got an ejectable magazine so that I can practice doing reloads. On top of that, on the side, it also has a bolt. I am aware that on a real Heckler & Koch, the bolt would be pretty much here. But again, it doesn't matter, because if it's an AK-47, the bolt's going to be on the other side anyway. So let's discuss the grips and positions. I'll briefly demonstrate them and then I'll go over each one of them in detail. Starting off, we have the close quarter ready, close quarter, combat ready, combat, and then apogee, as most people with a gun of this nature would just call the normal way of holding the gun. Okay, first thing is with this hand here, it just holds on to the handle like any other gun. This particular hand, now you can get the other guns that have a handle here that you can grip, and I will go over that, but for now, assuming that that gun doesn't have one of those, here's how it's used. So if the gun is held, doesn't matter if it's this way, or the combat position, this supporting hand should be wrapped around this way. On the area where the thumb and the fingers meet, it's held on this side, so it shouldn't be up here, it'll be on this side this way. And as you can see, my forearm should be directly in line with the way that this side of the gun. So not like this and not like this. Like this. Now as I hold the gun here in the what I just call as the combat ready, the close quarter ready position, I don't angle it off this way here, because I can guarantee you it's not aiming anywhere near my feet. It's right now aiming about half a meter away. Even on this side here, it's not aiming anywhere near my feet. Even if I were to spread my my stance out, which obviously you can't see on camera, and I don't want to fiddle around with it and have to constantly readjust it, but if you have one of these guns you can test it yourself. I'm borderline doing the splits right now, and where the gun is, it's still not aiming anywhere near my foot. If anything, I'd say the line of sight is probably at least a meter away, maybe a little bit more. So even if I have to be here and then, like if I'm in the fine position, basically this leg here is angled back a little bit and pivoting slightly upwards, it's still okay. So if I bring it down to here, it's still not crossing, it's not muzzle swiping my feet. When the gun is brought to here into the close quarter position, here's that from the side, the same principles apply as when using a pistol, which doesn't matter if it's here, 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 or here, or here. You still want to have that isometric pressure. The only difference being when it's in the close quarter position is that when I'm up here, I need to pull back this way and push forward with this hand. When I've got it towards my chest, much like the pistol, I want that 4 points of contact. So pushing this way, pulling this way, chest out, pushing this way, and then I'm pulling the weapon into me from here. And this is how the gun is gripped when you're in the close quarter position. Pay attention to the stock as well. It should be above my hand like this, and the elbows should still be tucked backwards this way. It's a bit difficult for me to cross over into the line of fire when my elbows are out, but I still don't want the elbows knocking into anything. On top of that, I have a much better grip of the gun if my elbows are back in. I don't want the stock tucked underneath my shoulder like this. When I'm in the close quarter position, the stock should be above my wrist. When transitioning from the close quarter position up into the combat position, the structure of the arms shouldn't change either, same as when using the pistol. And keep in mind where my fingers are here. As I bring the gun up like this, I'll bring the stock, I'll talk about where the stock placement in a second, but notice that the structure of my fingers here don't change. Some people have a habit of when they're in this position here to have the fingers on the top, and then when they bring it up like this, it's a little bit off because you should be holding the gun this way. So when it's in the close quarter position and transitioning up to here, this finger placement should not change. Now as for the stock placement, what I do is I'll place it again on an angle, if that wasn't obvious, but where that joint is on my shoulder and also just below the collarbone is where I want to place it. If it touches the collarbone, it's not a comfortable place to have it because, yeah, from here it's not great. So I want to have it just below the collarbone and tucked in nicely to this particular part of my body where, again, that shoulder joint sort of is. Everyone, I know that some people are a little bit differently body shaped around here, so fiddle around until you get into a place where you feel the most comfortable, but just as long as it isn't touching your collarbone. Alright, so when I'm in this position here, if I want to transition from the combat position to the apogee position, my hand here still doesn't change, but what I am doing is just turning the gun this way. So here's that from this angle, here's that from this angle. And again, the gun is still tilted anywhere between 30 to 35 degrees, not 45 degrees like this. So here is where typically it should be. And these are the basics when it comes to those particular positions. Now again, I want to talk about having the weapon up because, as I stated with the pistol, there are certain situations that you may be in when weapon up is the safest position. Well, that exact same principle is the same when it comes to submachine guns or assault rifles. And I don't want to have it up here for the same reason that I demonstrated with the pistol, is because I don't want it blocking my line of sight. I understand that some guns will have longer barrels and that may get in your sight, but I want as less as possible in my line of sight. So I'll bring it down here, once again keeping it on this side of my body, because if I want to transition from here into the close quarter position, well, I can do that quite easily. If I want to be up here and then go straight from here into the combat position, again, I can do that easily. If I've got on the other side, again, I always have to bring it past my field of vision, and I don't want to do that. So when the weapon's here, again, I want to have it, you know, sort of low as I can comfortably have it. I don't want to have it way down here because I've got a bend in the wrist now. So about here is where it's comfortable for me. And this is where I want to have the weapon until I need to pursue any further danger, regardless if I have to be into this position, if I have to get into this position, or bring it down into this position. The thing that you do want to remember is when bringing it down to the higher, so I was about to say high position, the close quarter position, is that you don't accidentally like hit your bicep with the stock. Some people have a habit of just bringing it straight down like this. You may need to widen out your elbow a little bit in order to allow for a gap for the stock to move out from. Depending on what kind of tactical units or tactical individuals that you may speak to, there's a few schools of thought as to what situations will determine if the gun is best held upwards or downwards. For example, if you're on a helicopter, well, most people don't ever say that, yeah, the gun should definitely be held upwards. In this situation, the gun should always be held downwards. The reason why we don't hold it upwards is because if the gun does go off, the last thing we need happening is it going through the roof of the helicopter and hitting the fan blades. And as I did state, you should be in control of your weapon and make sure that you don't get a negligent discharge, so we'll just blame it on one of the other team members. If someone starts shooting at the helicopter, as in the enemy, from, you know, wherever it is that they're going to shoot from, the last thing we need is one of the other guys freaking out, then accidentally pulling the trigger and then, you know, firing around through the roof of the helicopter. However, if you're on a boat, and when I say boat, I don't mean like a yacht or a fucking cruise ship. I mean something roughly the size of a bed that can house roughly 6 people. In this instance, yes, the gun would not be held down, it should be held up. The main situation that I always find where there's two schools of thoughts in the tactical world is when it comes to doing a raid on a room, or a room breach, whatever it is that you want to call it. Some guys are trained to hold the weapon down, others are trained to hold the weapon up. I personally prefer to hold the weapon up. The reason why I don't like to have my weapon down is because if there is someone else hiding around the door or a corner or something like that, and for whatever reason, because, you know, sometimes regardless of how much we train to not let certain things happen, shit still happens anyway. So if someone is around there and they're able to grab my gun, first of all, because my gun's already aiming downwards, they have all the force going down, so therefore they have the high ground as far as the strength goes. And I mean, they literally are higher above me, but if my gun's my weapon and, you know, the hand is the thing that's controlling that, well, yeah, the energy and force of that is coming from a high ground. So it's much more difficult for me here to, you know, pull my weapon back and then try to follow through with other kind of defensive attacks. The reason why I prefer having the gun up is because even if they should grab it, it's much easier for me to do something here, such as it's easy for me to try and, you know, step back and strike them with the muzzle of the gun, or shoot them if they're in the line of fire, obviously. Depending on the energy that's present coming from my opponent, I might be able to strike them with the stock of the weapon. You know, all in all, I find myself at a much better advantage if the weapon is held upwards. The other thing is that if I do have a sidearm on me, and technically speaking, if I'm in a situation where I'll be legally raiding a building, I will. I'm able to quickly grab that and fire for a couple of rounds. Anyway, the gun is here, and I have to take my hand off the weapon from this way and reach for my sidearm. There is a chance that they can grab it from here now, and I've got basically fuck all strength to be able to hold that in place. Whereas if I'm up like this and they try pulling it this way, well, if I've got it gripped towards me really well, even if they try and move it this far, the line of fire is going to go above me, and it's going to be much harder for them to pull it off me. And again, I'll be moving towards them if they're pulling the weapon in this direction. If the gun's aiming down, regardless of how much I want to move in this direction, the way my hand's structured, I'm going to lose that grip. So that's why I want to have the gun up and keep it pulled towards me, and I can quickly take out a gun, fire off a couple of shots, thus making sure I keep it locked to the side of my body. Remember, I still want to have isometric pressure, even if it's to the side of my body and not towards the chest. Anyway, then reholster it. Even if you have a knife of some sort, some guys like to have knives on the side of the rifle here. You may be able to quickly take that and stab the guy a couple of times. Or if the knife is on the sheath that's on somewhere in this general region where you can easily grab it, take it, you know, stab them a couple of times till they let go of the weapon. In this instance, I would recommend just dropping the knife. Don't reholster it and then shoot the individual. I recommend dropping the knife, and obviously depending on how far away they are, if they're 0 to 5 feet, come here, bang bang. You know, unless the gun's on fully automatic. I don't know if it's on single fire, 3-round burst, or fully automatic. You should know this, okay? But yeah, I find it much easier just to drop the knife and then take out the threat this way. And of course, if they're 6 feet and a bit further back, I find it a bit hard to believe that after I just get my gun back, they're going to be further than 30 feet away. But anyway, I would probably guess something around about, and probably no more than 10 or 11 feet. But in which case, come up to the combat position and take out the target from there. While I'm in the combat position, when it comes to the structure of my arms, not only does this one here need to be going in this direction from the weapon, but this arm here should be lined up with the handle. So I don't want it out here like this, I want it this way here. And if I have to move the gun, I want my arms to move with it this way. And of course, much like a pistol, if I need to move targets around this way, I'm going to move my body. I'm not going to wave the gun in this manner. Much like when using a pistol, the effective distance of these positions still aren't any different. If I'm in the close quarter position, it's because I'm going to be taking out a target anywhere from 0 to 5 feet away. If I'm in the combat position, it's because my target is going to be anywhere between 6 feet to 30 feet away. And then, any further than that, I'm going to have to push out to this position here. Now, I can effectively shoot with both my eyes open from this position. However, if you, for whatever reason, need to close one eye, because for whatever reason it's going to be more comfortable for you based on whatever situation that you find yourself in. For all I know, there could be like a powerful light on this side caused by the sunlight, man-made light, whatever reason, but there's a flash, and in order to protect your vision a little bit, you need to cover or close that eye. Well then, Okay, that's acceptable, but I recommend still practicing firing this way with both eyes open, just so that you have use of all your peripheral vision regardless of what position that you're in. The other thing is that if I close this eye, well, again, I've lost vision of... Yeah, in my peripheral vision I can't see my hand here now, I can only see it when it's here and closer. On top of that, I've lost sight of everything below the barrel, so both eyes open for me if I'm in this position is what I prefer. And I'm sure it goes without saying, if I'm in this position or this position here, both eyes still always stay open. The principle of the Z scan also is exactly the same as it is with a pistol, except for the fact that I won't be holstering a submachine gun or an assault rifle. So basically, after I've done the Z scan, or I've taken a look behind me first, then performed the Z scan, or done the Z scan first, then look behind me, I can just bring the gun down to here into the close quarter ready position. And then from there, they say depending on what your situation is, you can call for backup or, whatever. But this isn't a video where I'm going to go into the how-tos of, what trained professionals should do. I mean, you should already know that, and if you're not in that industry, then it shouldn't really be that applicable to you. Keep in mind, the only time you should be looking down the sights is when you're in the apogee position. When you're in the close quarter position or you're in the combat position, you're looking over the gun. Now when I'm in the close quarter position, I don't have to look down the sights in order to hit my target, and I'd rather have it close to me where I can protect it, where I've got better recoil management, and where I'm not aiming it closer towards the enemy where they can try and grab it and take it from me. Now what I'm going to do now is, from the close quarter ready position, is just bring my gun up and aim it at the eye of the camera. Now I'm looking at the screen now to see how well I got that placement, and I think it's pretty damn accurate. What I'm going to do now is step back a little bit further, and I'm going to have my gun in the combat ready position, and then just bring it up and aim it at the eye of the camera. Because in the combat position it's effective from ranges of 6 to 30 feet, and I want to move a little bit back, because right now I'm about 4 feet away from the camera, and I would rather move back a bit further, but I can't, because the wall there won't allow me, and I can't magically morph through it. So alright, I don't know about you, but I've got a pretty good feeling that if I were to pull this trigger now and the gun was real, that I would fire somewhere very close to the eye of the camera. Remember, the apogee position is to be used at a range of 30 feet and more. But you need to also understand that there are limits as to how far your gun in question will be able to reach, okay, effectively. Submachine guns will not be able to reach a distance as great as assault rifles, and then battle rifles will be able to reach a greater distance again. So understand the limitations of the weapon that you have. Let's discuss now how to hold the weapon if it's got a support handle for you. This one doesn't, so I'll demonstrate it as best I can with a flashlight. If it's here, and I've got the gun in the close quarter position, don't worry about so much about where the fingers intercept or how they cross over. What I want you to mostly pay attention to is the position of your forearm. And by that I mean the forearm of your supporting hand. What you want is to make sure that it's right angled to where the side of the gun is. So I don't want to be back too much this way or too much in the other direction this way. And it doesn't matter if I'm in the close quarter position and I need to take out threats from here. If I transition upwards this way into the combat position, I want to try and have my arm as right angled as possible. It's a little bit, depending on how far the stock is, the structure of the gun and all that, but the idea from here is that I'm not bringing my elbow back in from here. I want to have it out this way so I can continue pulling it towards me with a stronger grip. And when performed correctly, it should look something like this, where the structure of the arms don't change. If I am here and I keep my elbow tucked in towards me as I bring it up to there, well, yeah, now there isn't so much of a bend in the wrist, but when you perform this, you'll notice that when you're using that isometric pressure, which still should always be applied, it'll be much easier to grip it and pull it towards you this way as opposed to with the elbows this way.
On single shot, the high position is simply locked across the chest in this position here. When you're taking shots, you're like there. When you put it on fully automatic and lock it in nice and tight,
if the gun in question doesn't have a stock on it, put a stock on it. It doesn't matter how you hold the gun, if you're holding it out like this or whatever system it is that you're using. Any kind of gun like this that doesn't have a stock isn't going to be as effective as if it does have a stock. Typically speaking, if it doesn't have a stock, I can still use it in the car system, but the same principles apply if I'm down here, because, you know, I'm not using the stock when I'm in the close quarter position anyway. However, when I come up to the combat position, this is where a stock really does help me. However, if you don't have a stock, I'll just say that yes, you can still use this in the car system in the combat position. It still will not be as effective. But basically what you want to do is bring it up here to where it's comfortable, kind of similar position to, now pay attention where this elbow is. If I'm got the gun in the combat position to wherever my hands will be where if I'm holding a pistol, well, this arm here should be kept in the same position, and this hand is the one that comes over and just kind of grabs it. And again, I'm using that isometric pressure here. But again, it's not going to be as effective as it would be if I had a stock. So I don't really like to encourage people to use guns that don't have stocks on them. For me, this is kind of the equivalent of a guy using a pistol in the gangster grip position. It's not as effective as holding the gun in a more professional and proper manner. The same as this. Firing it without a stock is not as effective as firing it with a stock, so get a stock. Okay, let's discuss tactical reloads and combat reloads. Now, as we already know, I'm not really a big fan of tactical reloads, but fuck it, we'll go through it anyway. The other thing I want to mention is that the car system was developed for combat and survival, so it's not developed for competition. So with that being said, all the reloads that I'm going to be showing you work better for combat as opposed to competition. So for example, any kind of reload that involves having to rack the bolt afterwards, where I need to take my hand that, you know, is used for pulling the trigger and rack the bolt, I'm not going to be doing that because I want to have my finger close to the trigger at all times. Anyway, moving on. Now, regardless if the gun is in this position, this position, this position, if I have to reload, regardless if it's a tactical reload or a combat reload, what I'll always do is bring the gun here, angle it out to the side just a little bit, as you can see here, and I'll pull the stock into my my shoulder area, just below the collarbone, basically where it comfortably sits in the combat position, just, you know, at a different angle now. And if you don't have a stock, get one. Now, as for the magazines, now as I said with the pistol, the tip of the bullet should be always aiming in front of you. Well, with submachine guns and assault rifles, it's the exact opposite. They should be aiming the other direction now. And when I go to grab it, it's the exact same way as, you know, if I were to grab a pistol, pistol magazine, I'll use the palm of my hand and put it on the base of the magazine and take it out this way. Now, here's how a tactical reload is performed with all of the type of submachine guns and assault rifles. Yes, there are different kind of ways you can do it depending on the gun, but this way just works for all of them. So, first thing you do is you obviously grab the magazine this way, making sure the bullets are now aiming in front of you. Take out the old magazine, place the new one in, and then reholster it. Here's that from this angle. And now from the front. Sorry about the black shirt, I'm sure it makes it a little bit difficult to see. Okay, that's how the tactical reload is performed. Now let's go into the combat reload. And keep in mind, this gun is made of plastic, it barely weighs a kilo. If it's an AK-47, it's going to be quite heavy. So you need to be able to make sure you can manipulate your weapon around based on its weight. And it should always really be pulled into your shoulder with force. Now, when performing a combat reload, there's two ways of being able to do this. Now, forget the bolts and stuff like that for now. I just want to discuss what happens when you take the magazine out. And again, if you know your weapon, you should know if it's an MP5, if you had to perform a tactical reload, then the bolt here should be pulled back first and all that. But again, when it comes to the magazine part, two ways that I find very effective for when performing a combat reload. The first one is use of the thumb. You can disengage the latch by pushing on the thumb. I'll do it from this angle, like this. Then placing the other one in, racking the bolt. If it's an AK-47, the bolt will be on the other side, and I'll discuss that in a little bit further detail in a minute. The other way that you can perform a combat reload is by using the magazine itself to strip out the old magazine, placing the new one in, racking the bolt. Keep in mind, this is called the thumb disengagement is what I'll call it. Magazine disengagement doesn't work if the latch isn't long enough. So if the latch is long enough and allows you to be able to strip it out using that, do so. It'll also be more effective because the thumb, it's a little bit more of a fine motor skill, and it's fine placement. So if I accidentally miss and push off this way, it can be a problem. Whereas if I've got this on this angle, it doesn't matter if it's here, a little bit to the side. If it hits the latch and I'm able to knock the old magazine out the way, then I find that one to be a bit more effective for that reason. The reason why I also like to have the gun angled to the side like this, well, not only is the magazine closer and angled closer towards me to get to, but also if it's an AK-47, the bolt's on the other side, and the way that I prefer to rack the bolt is by coming underneath the gun. Reason being is because, as I stated, obviously I don't want to take this hand and use that, and I also don't want to go over the top. If I had to go over the top effectively, I'd need to bring the gun back to here, but the only issue is that if I've got a scope and stuff on the top, which really does make sense for a rifle, I never really found it to make much sense when it comes to pistols in combat. Competition shooting aside, I'm not an expert in that, so I'm not going to comment on it. But if there is a scope on the gun, then it makes it harder to get to. So underneath is a way that I should go to all the time. And this is the other advantage of having it angled in this direction, is because it's easier for me to get to the bolt now as opposed to here. And if the bolt is on this side of the gun, well, I can still easily get to that, and if it's an AR or M16 with a bolt at the very back, I can still easily get to it, and I'll rack the bolt by having my basically my palm sort of aimed towards me or down, whatever's more comfortable for you, and pulling the bolt back that way. I don't want to do it in such a way where I'm like this or some other angle that could just be considered to be awkward. Now, regardless of where the bolt is, if it's on the side, this side or the other side, I always want to have the palm of my hand facing towards me. So I'll pull the bolt back this way if it's on this side, and same as this way. I don't like, if it's on this side, to use it and pull it back that way. Reason being is because when I have to bring it back to this position or into this position, I find that my hand is already closer to where it needs to be as far as the structure of my arms. If I just do it this way. If I do it this way, I've got to bring my elbow out all the way here, and it takes a little bit longer to get to. Not much, but as I stated, in combat, every nanosecond counts to me. Well, this concludes the basics for submachine guns and assault rifles. Keep in mind, a submachine gun fires pistol-sized cartridges, whereas assault rifles and battle rifles fire much larger cartridges that are designed to take out targets at a greater distance. I find when I'm in the high position, obviously it's because I'm taking out targets that are 0 to 5 feet away, that pistols and submachine guns work better in this position. Assault rifles don't. However, there may be situations where you have no other choice but to use your assault rifle in this position. It may be because you've used all the ammunition up in your pistol, and now you're in a situation where you're in a narrow corridor, and this is the best way to hold the gun. Or maybe you don't have time to quickly transition to your sidearm because the fight is still on, and you have to use the weapon in your hand in order to take out these other targets.